Good morning and welcome. I'm Samina Ali Khan and I'm going to be your host, guiding you through the event today. It is great to have you with us for our first event of 2022, Learning and Development, which is being delivered to you by Public Sector Executive. Now, it's also great to see new faces joining us for the first time, and a very warm welcome to those who have returned from last year. The Learning and Development event today will be packed full of opportunities to network and also acquire current sector knowledge. And we want to thank the industry leaders and the experts who are with us today, who've been going to share their invaluable insights. Now, the content standard that will be shared on our PSE365 platform means that all the content is CPD certified. And for every hour of content that you watch live, you will earn 1 CPD point. So to get your certificate, please email the PSE team, and they're at marketing@cognitivepublishing.com. I'll say that again. It is marketing@cognitivepublishing.com, and really simple because they will sort it out for you. Now, in addition to CPD, you can also give back and feel good through some very friendly competition. Now, whilst learning today, our gamification tools will be active and you can score points by engaging with the platform's different elements. For example, if you join a live session, you will earn 50 points. If you make a connection with other delegates on the platform, that's 100 points. Or if you ask a question in a session or engage with one of the exhibitors in the digital marketplace, you'll earn another 50. So I think you get the gist by now. It's a way of earning points, so why not have a go? At the end of this event, those who finish in first, second, and third places respectively will get 250, 150, and £100 donated in their name and organisation. And that's to enter the Magic Breakfast charity, or to actually give to more trees. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about these two charities. The first one is the Magic Breakfast charity. Now, that can give a child a nutritious breakfast and a chance to succeed at school with every 34 pence that's donated. That means a £100 donation gives nearly 300 children a good start to their day, which is great. Alternatively, if you donate to more trees, a tree is planted for every £1 donated. And that too is fabulous for our planet. So to be in with a chance of winning, all you have to do is engage with all the great content that we have, and of course with the other delegates that are here with us. So on our agenda today, we have several panel discussions for you to enjoy. We also have networking opportunities that can be accessed via the speed networking function, which is going on throughout the day. You can also collaborate with your colleagues. That's another great source of education, and it all plays a part in the community that we're growing because it helps to extend the knowledge and the connection shared today, and that can be accessed at any time. And on that note, just a reminder that through our PSE 365 platform, you and your teams can access a wealth of resources and valuable expertise as part of our on-demand content, which is alongside the digital marketplace. We do value your feedback, so feel free to share your thoughts and experiences across social media. And we have a hashtag. It is PSE-365. I'll say that once again, PSE-365, and please use it and feel free to tell us what you think. So let's move on to the focus of today. As we all know, the global crisis has highlighted how critical public sector organisations are. And we've all had to adapt to new ways of doing things. That's, of course, in the past 2 years since the pandemic started. Now, the public sector has to determine how best to navigate new areas like e-learning and hybrid working. And there are challenges to overcome, like the digital skills shortage and the rapid increase in innovative technologies, both of which are compounded by ambitious targets. Well, in response to these pressures and the climate, there will be 8 new institutes of technology, with £95 million going towards the rollout of specific technical qualifications. The UK government is also investing £4 billion to post-16 education. And they are investing £2.5 billion in the National Skills Fund to help adults train and gain valuable skills. Now, we believe this should go some way to addressing a skills gap in the UK economy and potentially transform the skills landscape across the public sector. But as we all know, there are many aspects to this subject and they need to be considered. So, our first panel is going to look specifically at skills. The topic for discussion is what skills do public sector leaders need to face the challenges ahead? Now, we've seen the public sector undergoing exponential change from hybrid working, as we say, to the increased demand for digital service. But of course, we can expect more change in the future. The public sector has become increasingly digital, and we need the correctly skilled workforce to keep up with that accelerated transformation. Identifying of skills is also integral to deliver value to public services. Reskilling staff is, of course, a complex challenge, especially when you consider identifying what's needed now in order to future-proof that. So let me introduce my panel now, because they're going to help us explore the challenges and the solutions that we have for this particular discussion. So first we have Sam Nutt, who is Digital and Data Innovation Researcher at the London Office of Technology and Innovation. We also have Daisy Hooper, who is Head of Policy and Public Affairs, Chartered Management Institute, the CMI. We have Poonam Mistry, who's the Programme Support Officer, Leadership and Localism Team, LGA. And Stephen Somerville, Strategic Business Development Manager, Coursera. So let me say welcome now to all our panel. They are with us. Good morning to you. And there we are, they're all smiling. So that's a good sign. And we would, of course, like to include your voices as well, please, audience. So if you have any questions that you may think of during our discussion, please put them in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to include them in the discussion as we go along. So let's start our discussion. And Sam, if I could start with you, please. A simple question, probably quite a complex answer, I guess. But how have leaders and managers responded during COVID-19 with the shift to remote work? And what do they need to do better as we emerge from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think the key word really to describe the sort of skills and capabilities that leaders have had to act with is flexibility and adaptability, keywords. We saw practically overnight whole organizations shift from largely in-person working to largely remote working.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just a sort of symbolic shift. It wasn't just moving processes from one sort of form to another form. It meant doing things in sort of tangibly different ways. It meant, upskilling a whole organization in very few days to work, on platforms that maybe they'd never come across before. It meant training managers how to manage teams who are working fully remotely, who they may never sort of get eyes on for a year or more than a year in some organizations. It meant experimenting with new technologies in an extremely agile way and bringing sort of more of your organization along that journey with you. So I think learning those sort of skills demonstrated a flexibility and adaptability that we really need to institutionalize as best we can as we move forwards into a more sort of hybrid working model. Another element I would say that in general was recognized and has been acted on, but is definitely, there's a lot of room for improvement, is the recognition and the ability to collaborate both internally, so between teams within an organization, and also between organizations. In London, for example, we had a situation where we wanted to understand, what's the level of digital exclusion amongst the people in London when we're having to teach kids online, when we're having to work online, who's sharing devices, who doesn't have access to the data they need. And to understand that picture, that meant we had to be able to share information, across boroughs, but also within organizations, within different departments. And that sort of demonstrated the need that we need to be able to work better and collaborate better. And that's something in Lottie we're working hard on, to sort of put those infrastructures in place, for example, around data, making sure that your data is simply in formats, is the information governance models are there so that we can easily share data between organizations. But it also might mean, for example, within an organization, considering how you structure teams and organizations and deliver projects, maybe working in more multidisciplinary teams, using methods like agile working to deliver projects. And I think that's something we're certainly seeing local governments in London, really interested in exploring as they emerge from the pandemic. And I think the last thing is that amongst leaders, to us, it seems like data and digital literacy have really been key skills. In terms of the health data, we've had to understand quite complex pictures. What does something mean in one country? What does it mean in our extremely local context in a different country? We're thinking about exponential growth of like trends and the different sorts of things. And we've seen as we interact with leaders that in general, that literacy, that understanding of data has massively improved. And that's going to be something certainly moving forwards when, service models are increasingly digitized and depending on large sets of data, we're going to need leaders to have a really good understanding of that.
Okay. For now, Sam, thank you very much. It does lead on to something I want to ask Daisy, actually. And Daisy, what are the core competencies that senior managers need in order to manage their organisations effectively? I know Sam touched on a few things, but what in your opinion are the absolute core competencies?
Yeah, so we have seen through lots of research we've done over the past couple of years that this kind of human element of management is increasingly important. The sense of, and particularly for the pandemic when people were not just dealing with challenges at work, but many challenges in their home life, health-related challenges or caring responsibilities, having to juggle all of that. And we have seen that kind of building trust and communicating clearly and openly has been one of the key drivers of firm performance. And we know from the ONS that better managed firms fared better during the pandemic. So it really can't be underestimated how much that kind of open, communicative, some mentioned collaborative approach can engage and help to get the best out of them. And in terms of competencies, one of the best ways to do that is to model good behavior. So don't demonstrate to your staff that you're working all hours and available all hours. Avoid things like digital presenteeism and recognize the signs of digital presenteeism among your staff. Recognize that people need time and space to do their jobs well, and think about how you evaluate outcomes rather than simply outputs and hours worked. And I think that kind of mental health and championing diversity and inclusion is really important as well, because recognizing that people work in different ways, and that can be a real positive for your organization. But I would just finally add that one of the things that we implemented during so I think this can sometimes be a challenge for senior leaders, particularly those who are used to being further removed from the people they work with in the past. And I think in many ways, moving to a hybrid and virtual working environment has been a leveler. People all have the same space on the screen. And one of the things that we implemented was having a weekly Q&A with the CEO. So you could ask any question you like, and she would answer any question. And that really helped to build trust within our organization, to build engagement in our organization. And of course, it wasn't just answering the question, but then saying, this is what I'm planning to do, given with your feedback. And yeah, I think those are some of the really important things that it's worth leaders and managers investing time in, because we have seen that it does deliver more engaged employees, more productive employees, and basically a better culture, I suppose.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that was happening across all sorts of industries, wasn't it? I'm listening to what you're saying and thinking, yes, that happened to us. And it's a completely different field. But it was certainly common to everybody, wasn't it? And after all, a learning curve for all of us as well. At this point, Stephen, can I bring you in as well? Because at Coursera, you work a lot on leadership programs, as well as a lot of the public sector upskilling programs. So what sort of trends are you seeing? And especially given what we've just heard from Daisy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with over 100 different government administration or publicly owned entities and lots of different kind of bodies all over the world, right? So we're a big learning platform, in case nobody knows who we are, 93 million learners. So we generate a lot of data, and we've been looking at that data since the get-go. We were founded by data scientists. And so, yeah, we've definitely seen some trends in this sector that have been really interesting. So firstly, to tie back into what Sam was saying, as public sector organizations have had to rethink their delivery of services and their internal work processes and strategies and so on, we've seen that emphasis correspondingly on the skills around technology, data, being much higher priorities than before. But on data, there is a problem. I agree that there's been much improvement, but every single program that we're working on in the public sector is prioritizing data skills. I think there are two things going on. I think they're building data capabilities with specialist teams, and that's definitely a very good thing to do. Deep skilling and upskilling is fast moving, dynamic area, but also building general literacy across the organization to make better decisions using data. So, but I think there is a problem there still, and to be fair, that's in the private sector as well. People's, there is a need for much more upskilling. The other thing that Sam said that I just quickly wanted to tie back into around broader skill sets, adaptability and adopting agile working methods, absolutely seen a corresponding demand for upskilling in that. And just to tie back into what Daisy said, we often look at skills demand across the platform, and in 2019 we looked at two different groups of learners, those with jobs and those without jobs, and we looked at that in 2020 as well. And in 2019 they were coming to us for similar sorts of skills, so they're skills relating to data science, skills relating to project management, and so the unemployed group and the employed group were kind of coming to us for the same thing. In 2020 that changed, and the key change was the employed group were now looking for more human skills. So it's a more kind of mindfulness, more decision making, critical thinking, and intelligent listening, and all sorts of skills that are associated with the sort of more human side of how we operate, as they try to juggle their lives and schooling their children and all those kind of different demands that were placed on us. So we thought that was an interesting change and definitely maps into what Daisy said.
And do you see that continuing? Because we're now in this hybrid model, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't see that going away. In fact, when we think about skills and we're looking at the kind of demand and how that corresponds with different regions or industries or disciplines, we're seeing this sort of ideal portfolio as being a combination of those technology skills, data skills, and human skills. We think that you need all three of those in different proportions depending on your role.
Okay, let's bring in Poonam because she's been waiting patiently. Poonam, tell us firstly, what can you tell us about NGDP and what it actually is, please?
Of course, yeah, thanks, Samina. So we are the National Graduate Development Programme for Local Government, which is quite a handful to say. That's why we shorten it down to NGDP. And we are a 2-year graduate programme that aims to fast-track graduates into management positions within local councils and local government. So our councils are based across the country. We partner with all types of authorities, and they are able to hire graduates that are based in their council for 2 years. And within that 2 years, they rotate between 3 to 4 placements. So they get the experience of working across different service areas, different departments, and on different projects. Alongside their placements, they also complete a learning and development program. So we're also giving them those kind of future skills to develop, both in terms of the local government context, the challenges they might be facing, everything from finance to kind of leadership skills and management of people and projects. So we're kind of hoping by the end of the 2 years, they come out of the scheme as really well-rounded, kind of with tons of experience and kind of the skills to develop their careers further. So yeah, we're kind of coming at it from the angle of we're developing the leaders of the future and giving them that skills and experience to kind of develop themselves.
So what have you found to be the key skills that they need, especially when they're going on these placements and indeed for the future?
I think it really is about the willingness to learn as you go. Every local authority is different, and all of the challenges that may be similar across the country can vary from different council to council. And also it's kind of the willingness to give back to the community and help those local areas to overcome their challenges and develop themselves as well. So we've just seen the Levelling Up paper come out yesterday, and that is a massive part of what local councils are working on and what our graduates work on as well.
Okay, thank you, Poonam. We have had a question, which I'm going to ask now, actually, because I'm conscious that our time is ticking away. It's come from Philip Watson, and he says, is there a commitment to further education, a further education college? I know we started off the discussion talking about the sort of investment we're getting in this whole area. Do any of you want to have an answer? Well, take that question and indeed give us an answer. What do you think? Should there be a commitment really to a further education college? Sam, do you want to take that, or Daisy even?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in.
Yep.
I think we see in different government, at different levels of government, different types of commitment for developing certain skills across the public sector. So, you know, in the government digital service, GDS, they've had a education program running for basically the length of their entire existence. In London, at a local level, we're exploring sort of options for training people in particular skills where there are particular skill gaps, for example, in digital and data. I think this is just my opinion. This isn't a position of Lottie, but my feeling is that, you know, we have local interventions, we have national interventions. Of course, there's with devolved powers, there's different interventions in Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England. Yeah. I think a joined up policy approach, which I suppose the Levelling Up paper starts to get at, the industrial policy that they sort of replaced with this Levelling Up paper, perhaps address that a little bit more directly, but a sort of coherent national level approach for levelling up, considering local dynamics and national dynamics, I think would be really welcome from our side, in particular where there are these massive skill gaps.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Daisy, what would you say is the link really between strong leadership skills and organisational productivity? Because there's a difference, isn't there?
Between skills and productivity, yes. I mean, management skills are recognised as one of the key drivers of productivity, and also an area where we in the UK have historically failed to invest. And I think there is a culture in the UK of not really valuing management training, or thinking that it's something for someone else, or that it's not a good use of public money, I suppose. Despite the fact that it has such a huge impact on people's well-being and productivity at work. We've seen in the press the past couple of weeks lots of discussions about the 4-day working week, and this idea, which is increasingly backed up by the evidence, which shows that if you give your employees a little more freedom to fit their work around their lives, they can be equally productive. But in an environment like that, management skills are more important than ever. You have to be able to give clear instructions, make sure that goals and objectives are clear, whilst also giving people room to find their own path and use their own initiative, be self-motivated and develop, I suppose. Yes. And that's where we see the changes in productivity coming from. And I think that's a cultural shift now, which the pandemic has probably accelerated, which and the idea of having better managers who care about you as a person and your growth can only be a good thing. But I think there's a myth where we think that whether you're a good or a bad manager is just fixed. And as a professional body for managers and leaders, we would absolutely disagree with that these are skills and competencies that can and should be learned, and that should be more of a priority, I suppose, in terms of education policy, because at the moment it's not really built in that way.
I certainly hear what you're saying. I'm just wondering if Stephen wants to jump in there, because obviously reskilling and upskilling, if the attitude is perhaps a little lukewarm, how do we change that? We've got to get that to happen, haven't we? How should government perhaps think about reskilling?
So yeah, well, there's a lot there. So definitely there's a need to drive a slightly different attitude to the one that Daisy outlined around the value of management skills, particularly during this new era of remote work. We've got a lot of learning programs that are about managing remote teams and kind of helping to build those capabilities. In terms of reskilling, I think people talk about upskilling and reskilling in the same breath. They're very different things. I think what we're seeing is that you might have a surplus of one type of skill set or job role and a deficit of another, and so you might have financial analysts that could become data analysts, and data analysts are quite hard to get. Financial analysts, you've probably got too many because software is automating them. That kind of context. But actually getting that kind of internal mobility to happen requires cross-departmental working, requires identifying the talent that's available there and identifying the skills deficit that you have. So what we're urging organizations to do is to measure the skills that they have, to think about the skills they're going to need in the future. We can help with that. We have data. We can look at what other organizations are doing across the world that we're working with. But to be deliberate about it, to have a plan, and to kind of communicate that in a clear way to potential learners that might take part in this, or people whose roles may be affected by this kind of program. On the governmental level, I think that's that's a really big question. I think how we approach skills and at what point in our lives we think people need skilling. I know this is a bit of a tired conversational gambit, but I think we really do need to get used to the idea that we have the responsibility to maintain our skills levels as individuals. Our employers have the responsibility to keep us upskilled, and government, if you like, has a responsibility to make sure its citizens are skilled. That's persistent and ongoing from pretty much birth till death. That's something that needs to be thought of, not as something that happens for a little bit at the beginning of your life, but something that is threaded throughout every individual's life and career.
Yeah, and Poonam, I'm guessing the graduates that you're getting ready for these leadership roles, they already have that inbuilt, don't they? They understand that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, especially kind of being early in their careers, it might be something that they kind of take forward to the rest of their kind of jobs going forward, which is really important for us to know that we've kind of given them the tools really to start thinking about their skills for the future. Our learning and development program, it runs alongside the whole 2 years. And I think the kind of main thread of it is what more can you use this for? It's not just for the job you're in right now, but think about your whole career ahead of you.
Thank you. We've got just under 5 minutes, so I'm going to rattle through a couple of questions that have come in. So just bear with me. This is Brian Hilton. It's sort of to all the panel. What's the panel's view on slowing down the digital aspect of work, given the fact that we're human beings and our need to interact when working together? So can I have a couple of sentences from each of you, please, on that, and then we'll see what we can do. Sam, do you want to start off on that one, please? Your view on the digital aspect of all this. We are human, aren't we? And it has been a trying and difficult 2 years, hasn't it?
100%. Something in Lottie we try and do is, schedule no meeting hours, encourage people, when there's limited sunlight in the days to go out, get sunlight. We should be trying to develop digital technologies that get the best out of us as people. And if that means technologies that effectively allow us to use technology less, that's also something we should be thinking about. So I couldn't agree with that more as an idea to sort of drive how we develop digital solutions in general.
Okay, thank you. Daisy?
I totally agree with that. I would say the advent of digital tools poses a significant risk to people's well-being at work, and managers and leaders need to be really mindful of that, and they need to create, if individuals can't do it themselves, they need to create that safe space when people don't feel like they have to be checking their emails every 30 seconds, for example. And I think that is a really important role for managers and leaders. And we know that the vast majority of managers and leaders are not well trained in that, how to kind of manage that with their team. So I think that's going to be a really important area going forward.
And that was a problem, wasn't it? That was certainly something people felt they had to be online. They had to be at the end of their computer the whole time, didn't they? And that's not good.
Yeah,
in terms
and I
of
think
people having breaks.
I would just add, I think it's a bit lazy of managers to say, well, we can't tell if they're doing a good job unless we see them online or unless we know that they're working a certain number of hours. We know that people don't work that way. We certainly know that people don't work efficiently that way. So managers and leaders need to take responsibility for that. I think it's really important.
Poonam, would you like to answer that question as well, please? We've got to get the panel's view. Got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I completely agree with what Daisy's just said in terms of that pressure to be online, especially during the pandemic, was huge at one point. And I think, as much as it has been a complete shift to hybrid working, nothing really replaces that face-to-face interaction and being in an environment where you get to speak to your colleagues and learn from them as well, which you can't replicate in the same way at home. So as much as obviously the shift is happening, we're kind of moving towards that digital kind of timeline. Nothing can replace that, in my opinion.
Okay, and Stephen, please, your perspective on that as well, please.
Sure, absolutely. I agree with the sentiments. I think human interaction is massively important. I think digital technologies are getting better at that, and we are learning as we enter this new realm that we're in. But I don't think we can escape from the fact that we are moving to a more digital culture globally, and that creates a whole lot of opportunities for people to get access to education and work outside of their immediate environment physically. So I think, you're right. We need to interact, but this is where we are now, and I think it's going to continue.
So you're saying really it's a question of working smarter, isn't it? Given this is the change we have, and it's here now.
We need human interaction. We definitely need to take care of people. Absolutely, completely agree with that. But I think, this is where we are now, and these digital tools need to get better at allowing us to do that in a responsible way.
Okay, I've just got one final question, and Sam, it is for you. Who will the key decision makers of the future be in government workplaces?
Well, I think they might be the people on Poonam's grad scheme, but
correct answer.
I'd just like to say, I think as well, we're going to increasingly see trends about allowing more working level staff, employees, help shape the future direction of organizations. They're the ones who have the insights about how they work better as individuals. So I think, a lot of the leadership of the future will be empowering, the people who understand better about themselves to make decisions on their own behalf.
Okay, Daisy, would you like to add to that? I just think it's an interesting one, isn't it? That who do we see as our future leaders?
Yeah, I'd like to think that there's some people on Poonam's graduate scheme. I'd also like to think there are people who wouldn't necessarily get onto a graduate scheme in the first place. And I do think that we need to move to a leadership model where we involve people working on the ground and their day-to-day experiences of work and valuing those diverse experiences in order to inform management and leadership decisions at a higher level. I think that, the days of just the CEO making decisions in a room on their own or with a couple of very senior people who have a very similar experience to them is on the way out. And I think overall, that's probably a good thing. But I think there's more that we need to do to make sure that people coming in from perhaps not the traditional route get the development and the experience that they need in order to do their jobs well. And again, that's a big role for managers, right? Like creating development opportunities, ensuring that they reach everyone and are not just clustered in a certain demographic of employees.
Absolutely, and of course, Stephen, you see these future leaders because presumably they are on some of your courses. So what do they look like to you? Just very quickly, we've got a few seconds left.
A few seconds left. Well, there's really interesting research coming out all the time about Generation Z and their attitudes towards what they expect from leadership. There's a great course on Coursera, Leadership in the 21st Century, from Copenhagen Business School. It covers a lot of this, transparency and distributed decision making and so on. So I think that's where the change comes.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Poonam, I think everybody said they'd hope it was your graduates who are the future leaders. So I'm assuming you're just going to agree with that.
Definitely going to agree. But just really quickly to add that, we always say that the leaders should represent the communities they're serving. So I think there's definitely a point in there about kind of what everyone has said about that changing dynamic of it's not just going to be closed off rooms of people that are cut off from the people they're serving. It needs to be more inclusive than that.
Okay. We are going to have to leave it there. We're a little bit over time, but panel, want to thank you all for being with us today. It's been really good to talk to you. So Sam, Daisy, Poonam and Stephen, thank you very much for your time today. And we look forward to speaking to you again at some point. Thank you. And also thank you, audience, for your questions as well. That was really good. I'm sorry we don't have a huge amount of time, but as much as we can, we will include your questions. We're going to take a break now. It is time to digest really what's been said so far, and also for you to have a cup of tea, hopefully. And if you do have the chance, please do engage with the speed networking opportunity. You never know, perhaps you could use what we've just learned or heard about as an icebreaker. And we look forward to seeing you back here at about 20 to 11. Thank you.